You'll never take me alive! For freedom! Oh, hi. Sorry about that. I thought the clocks had finally found me. You ever wonder why people talk in video games? Probably not. I mean, humans talk about stuff all the time. It's kind of our thing.
You go outside and ask some chipmunks for financial advice and you're getting nothing, because chipmunks can't speak. And if they did, do you think they'd go around giving that stuff out for free? They aren't a charity case. You want the goods and fork over the cash, capiche?
But really, words in video games have been around for a long time, and have usually been pretty important, even in the early stuff. Yes, I know, most early games just had the title screen in the menu, and if you've been a good boy all year long, maybe an introduction or a scrolling wall of text to tell you which pixelated blobs were you and which ones needed to die.
But as time went on, developers began to put more and more text into games in the form of dialogue, aka 2 or more people talking to each other about stuff. And as the scope of what games could handle increased, it only made sense that the most common form of communication, apart from that and that, would become more common along with it.
And nowadays, dialogue is everywhere in games. It's an almost inexorable part of how they are made. And while it's debatable whether or not this is a good thing, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about how dialogue is used in games. Or all used. In some way.
On the broadest level, dialogue in games is split into two categories, the textual and the audible, aka written and spoken. In the early days, games had nowhere near the processing power needed for spoken words. Hell, they could barely manage a few bleeps and bloopers. But soon enough, voice synthesizers and audio processing opened up the way for games with spoken lines and even fully voiced games. And yet, we still use text. Why? We can set voices to everything.
We have the technology.
If we aren't chained by the limits of hardware, why not voice everything all the time?
Let me ask you something. Have you ever played a game that would have been a lot better if the character said, never open their mouths? Ever?
I'm not talking about bad writing, that's a whole other bucket of cuttlefish, but rather those times when characters' voices just made you want to go back in time and kick Ray Dolby right in the Dolbies. You see where I'm coming from? Sometimes it's just the smarter choice not to voice your game. Maybe there isn't enough money or motivation to hire voice actors, or maybe you want to set the tone of something strange and outlandish, like the voice synthesizers in Okami. What did we just listen to? I don't know, but it's got my seal of approval. Just stick that on there and knock off for lunch. My point is that if text can carry your game, then there's a good chance you're better off just leaving it at that. But, you're saying, does that mean that you oppose spoken dialogue on principle and think that games should be the modern equivalent of the silent picture circa 1877? It would be the height of silliness to say that voice acting has no place in video games, especially now that we have the likes of Martin Sheen and Christopher Walken among our ranks. Spoken dialogue adds a new level of connection with the player by speaking to them in their own terms. You see what I did there? Putting a voice to a character gives the player another trait to distinguish them from everyone else. Would Mass Effect have been nearly as effective if you had nothing but subtitles for the whole game?
Have killed many, Shepard. Many methods. Gunfire, knives, drugs, tech attacks. Once with farming equipment, but not with medicine.
Yeah, okay. Admittedly, this is the main reason why having one voice actor play multiple characters can so easily break a game's immersion. You're playing Fallout New Vegas and you're like, oh yes! Traveling the wasteland and shooting Romans in the face! But then some NCR guy walks up to you and's all like,
that's close enough. Who are you, and what do you want with me?
And then you go on your way trying to get back into the mood of things, and then...
Yeah! Who won the lottery? I did! Smell that air!
Dakiyosuke, what are you doing in New Vegas? Get yourself back to Japan this minute, young man! Get back in there! Now that said, voice acting can expand on a world just as much as it can constrict it. Think about games like Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, or hell, even something like Star Fox Adventures that uses a made-up fairy language. Now step back for a minute and ask yourself, why did they do that? Why go through the trouble of creating a language that the audience won't even be able to understand? Two reasons, one pessimistic and one not horribly depressing. First, because the language is universally unknown to all audiences, only subtitles will need to be changed during localization, which clears up money which can then be used for the company marijuana fund. But on a more artistical level, a fantasy language goes a long way towards setting the scene of an otherworldly, well, world. It shows the player that the place they're about to step into is set apart from their own, which is the idea in creating a fantasy or science fiction atmosphere. My point that I'm trying to make with all this is that the delivery of dialogue is a key part of crafting a game, and all possible options should be considered, both low and high tech, in choosing how it should be conveyed. We shouldn't allow ourselves to fall into the trap of settling for subpar voice acting when we don't need it in the first place. But we also can't allow our fears of past mistakes to hold us back when it can be used really well to enhance the experience of a game. Solid writing can make a good game great, but if you can get those lines said by good voice actors, it can become something truly special.
Now here's a kid whose whole world got all twisted, leaving him stranded on a rock in the sky.
It's like molten chocolate being poured down my ear canal. No, it's not. That would hurt. Hope you liked my video, by which I mean I hope you pressed the like button right on down there, and if you didn't, it's not too late. Click here for last week's video, and I promise that if you subscribe to me, I will have more subscribers. It's guaranteed.